Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We had a really overwhelming response to this webinar, so we're so excited to bring you these useful tips on how to set your child up for success this summer. Just before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We will be recording this webinar, and the recording will be sent out to everyone who registered. So just letting you all know that we usually get that question over and over again as the webinar gets going. And secondly, we will take questions at the end. So please, anytime you think of a question, type it in right then so that you don't miss that chance to ask it, and we will get to them at the end. With that, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Jackson. She's our Vice President of Programs and Outcomes for Brain Centers. Rebecca brings heart, knowledge, and the firsthand experience delivering life-impacting outcomes to over 1,000 families for the past decade, serving as Executive Director for a multitude of brain balance centers. So with that, hi, Rebecca, how are you?
Hi, Victoria, thank you. Great to kind of sort of meet everyone. Thank you for joining on what day of the week is this? Wednesday? I know we lose track of the days. Like Victoria shared, I do come from firsthand experience with brain balance. I've been a part of the brain balance system for almost 10 years now, and have personally worked with over 1,000 families in several different centers. And in addition to that, I am a mom as well. So I've got firsthand brain balance knowledge and experience, and then also the real life reality of being a parent, which if you listen closely, you'll hear in the background. I have the dog outside so that I'm not in center today, I'm at home. So I have my dog outside so that you don't hear the barking, but somebody just rang the doorbell and the dog is barking. So, you know, reality of being a mom. Things aren't always graceful and pretty. But here today, what we're here to talk about is really helping your family get set up for success for summer. I know for myself, summer is my absolute favorite time of year. I'm a person that loves sunshine and beach and pool and warm weather. It's why we moved from Minnesota to North Carolina, where we live now. But summer is also a time where it can be really chaotic for families. And so we really just kind of want to walk you through, again, giving you a better understanding of sometimes why this is a more challenging time for kids, as well as some tips and suggestions to help you get the most out of this summer. Now, some of what we're going to cover today are going to be a few things that you may already know, but just because you know it doesn't mean a reminder isn't a bad thing. And I'm a big person in don't just tell me what to do, tell me why I'm doing it, and I'm much more likely to comply. You know, if you were to say to me, hey, you know, gluten's not good for a lot of people. Maybe you want to think about cutting out gluten. I'm like, but I really like pizza. But then if you were to say to me, Rebecca, every time you eat gluten, for you, it drives up inflammation. It's going to create brain fog. That's where some of your back discomfort's coming from. Not to mention your son's getting that rash that he's getting because of gluten. Guess what? I don't eat gluten. So my goal today is to not just say, hey, here's a tip, give you the why behind it. So the hope is you're more motivated to put the work in and follow through to make it happen. So review tips that you may already know, teach you a few tips that maybe you hopefully haven't thought of, as well as helping you to understand kind of the whys behind, again, why this can be a more challenging time for some kids than others. I don't know about you guys, but I know for my family, the end of the school year feels like absolute chaos. This is a picture from the last day of school last year from my daughter's class. You know, approaching summer is such a fun, exciting time of year. It's a transition time. You're checking off another grade done. There's a feeling of relief and ending something, but then piled onto it are a ton of additional activities. All of the school picnics and field trips and field days in addition to everything else. It's just, it can be such a chaotic time of year. And when you think of it, you know, many kids handle these things with no problems at all. It's no big deal. But then when you think of kids, if you're a child where you're more sensitive to sensory input, and then we've got a day like a field day with tons of sensory stimulation where it's loud and noisy, you're outside in the North Carolina heat for hours all day that day. I probably won't volunteer as a parent this year because it was so draining on me last year. I mean, the headache that I had and the sunburn by the end of the day was significant. So again, if you're a child that's more sensitive to sensory stimulation or heat or unstructured routine, these days can be much more challenging and much more stressful rather than just pure fun. And that displays for a lot of our kids as behaviors. So then when we start to think about we fill our summer with activities, right? This is supposed to be kind of a downtime to relax. But for a lot of us, if we're working parents, the kids can't just stay home every day. And so we fill their schedules with going to different camps. We keep our kids in sports and active. We take family vacations. There's more time playing with neighborhood friends. So again, all great fun things. But again, if you're a child that is more sensitive to change, struggles more with less structure, some of these things like a family vacation of going to the beach, which should be a ton of fun, can really spiral into an event that can become stressful for the whole family. And now instead of creating those great family memories, you're just trying to get through it. So we really want to take a look at some tips and suggestions to get the most out of these pieces, because summer should be a fun time. And we really want to work to set our kids up for success with this, and for our families, because let's be honest, when the kids are happy, the families are happy. So making sure that there's a healthy balance between fun and what the kids need as well. So if we're not careful, once we hit summer, we've got a time of lack of structure. That lack of structure can impact how we eat. It can impact our activity. Oftentimes we'll see kids moving less, doing more screen time. Summer and that lack of structure can also impact our sleep. So suddenly when we have kids that have less sleep, more stimulation, less movement, more brain fatigue, less structure, we're setting ourselves up for a perfect storm. But yet then we're taking our kids to do these fun things. So, we're spending money to bring them to the beach, or we're spending money to put them into something, and suddenly we're getting just a meltdown and a barrage of behaviors. We need to be able to take a step back and say, okay, this summer, I want to have those fun family memories and experiences, but what is it that I can do as a parent to set my family up for success with that? And to also recognize in my child, okay, this is why I'm seeing some of what I'm seeing. So our goal is to avoid that perfect summer storm if we can. So we're going to cover kind of a whole list of tips and sections today. We're going to talk about food, planning, technology, movement, positivity, and sleep. We are going to cover a few other things in addition to that as well. We're going to start with the topic of food. I don't know what it is about summer. Maybe it's the lack of structure, maybe it's the heat. We find ourselves doing more treats and snacks with our kids in the summer. I know I feel like I can never keep enough groceries on hand when it comes to summertime with my kids. I guess they're home all day, they're swimming, they're doing things, so they're hungry. And with the heat, I think there's more of the ice cream truck going through the neighborhood, ice cream treats. But we really need to stop and think. And the perfect example of this to me, my husband does an activity called Y Guides with our kids. And it's a chance for dads and kids to spend time together, and they do all sorts of cool and fun kind of adventurous activities. So this was probably 2 years ago. So my daughter would have been about 9 at the time. And my husband and the other Y Guide dads were taking this group of 9-year-olds to a hockey game in North Carolina. And so they were all meeting, they did dinner together, and then they stopped at this gas station. So those that didn't do dinner, they all met up at the gas station, and then they went to the hockey game together. So they got to the gas station and they said, yep, girls, go ahead, pick out some treats and snacks. My husband, being pretty cautious and aware with these things, let my daughter pick out one treat and then some water, a bottle of water to go with it. Some of the other scenarios were, grab whatever you want. So suddenly we had these 9-year-old girls that were drinking a soda, having a candy bar, doing a pack of M&Ms, doing not one, but multiple sweet things all at the same time. And then they brought the girls to the hockey game, and the girls lost their minds. The girls, I mean, you can picture a group of 8, 9-year-olds shrieking and screaming and so excited to be together. And not one of them really cared about hockey, but just the experience of it. And my husband said the amount of dirty looks, they even got comments from other people just asking them to please damp down the behavior on the girls because it was interfering with everybody else's experience. But what happened with that scenario was the parents allowed the kids to have a treat, which escalated the behaviors, and now the parent needed to discipline the child for the behavior. And it's something that's so easy to let happen as a parent because we all like treats. I love a cupcake. And so we don't want to say no treats to our kids. It's fun to have treats, but we need to keep these things in moderation, and we need to think through the impact of it. My son is another great example. 2 years younger than my daughter. He's a pretty calm, even keel, easygoing kid. But what we started to notice is we would let him order lemonade at a restaurant, and this behaved, easy kid would do a lemonade, and suddenly he's falling out of his seat and driving everyone nuts around him. So what we realized is if we wanted to set Drew up for success going out for dinner with family, he needed to drink water. Otherwise, we paid the price and he paid the price because now we're yelling at him for his behaviors while his body is just vibrating with sugar energy. So really think through when your kids say, hey, mom, can I have a treat, or what can I have? Can I order that soda with dinner? Think through what activities do you have going on over the next hour or two. If you're at a park and they're going to run around and burn that energy, then maybe that's a better time to have that sweet treat. But if you're at a time where you're wanting them to behave, you're out for dinner with grandparents that you don't see that often, that's the time to say, hey, you know what, not now, or you already had one sweet treat this morning. So really keeping that moderation in mind. It's also really important to understand what sugars do to all of our bodies. We get that sugar rush, and then we get a sugar crash. And so we get that vibration energy. And then when we have a sugar crash, what happens is our body craves more. And so we put our kids in this cycle of constantly seeking a sweet treat and constantly wanting more. So it becomes a really negative cycle. So, and you'll notice yourselves, around Christmas time with treats, we tend to have more sitting out, and I'll catch myself at the end of the school day when the kids have a treat, whether they're there or not, I'll hit 3 o'clock and I'll start wandering the kitchen thinking, gosh, I'm just in the mood for a little something. And so our bodies, if we have sugar every day at 3 o'clock, our bodies are programmed to want sugar every day at 3 o'clock, and then again at 5 after we burn through those sugars in our systems. So moderate the sugar. The next piece is talking about proteins and healthy fats. Is sugar burns through our body really fast, and it's an easy energy source. What burns through our body more slowly and is a healthier energy source are proteins and healthy fats. So your coconut oil and your avocados, your nuts for healthy fats. So making sure that when we're wanting to even keel our kids' behaviors, that we're even keeling the fuel and food we're putting in their body to sustain that. So one of the pieces with protein is trying to get protein into kids 5 times a day. And I know that's not easy. So many of our kids are really picky eaters. So it's a matter of really brainstorming and getting creative. But getting them consistent fuel is going to lead to more consistent behaviors. Food dyes, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. There's a ton of research that we've known about this since the 1970s, really taking a look at how food dye impacts our systems. There are people that are far more sensitive to food dyes than others. But the bottom line is absolutely you can see a spike or an escalation in negative behaviors after a child has food dye. And so often the food dye is paired with sugar, right? When you think about M&Ms, that's going to be all your food dyes plus the sugar, and so that can be a double whammy for kids. So if you have a focus on really trying to minimize or eliminate food dyes in your house this summer, by doing that, it's going to naturally push you towards healthier foods. And I know it's hard to change everything with nutrition all at once, but if you just kind of put a couple pieces of, okay, this summer we're really going to pay attention to food dyes. So if I choose a breakfast cereal, I'm going to choose one without food dye. So picturing or focusing on minimizing the food dye, having occasional sweet treats, not all the time, and even keeling those proteins. Here's just a quick example. We do always really try to focus on getting protein in my kids consistently. And especially with my daughter, we'll notice if she starts to get a little more owly, whiny, one of the first things we always say was, when was the last time you had protein? Which with an 11-year-old does now elicit an eye roll. However, what we see is we plug protein in her, and within 20 minutes, she's back to her sweet, even keel self. And so we watch it in her, and the healthy fats helps that as well. So just a quick example for breakfast. You know, sometimes we'll do eggs, sometimes it's sausage, bacon. I don't do a lot of like huge, dramatic, big, fancy breakfasts in the morning. So for me, a lot of times with the sausage patties, I'll buy 1.5 pounds of sausage, and in one morning, I'll make up a ton of sausage patties and throw them in the fridge so that it's just a quick, ready to go, eat them warm or cold. Snacks, a smoothie is a great way to throw some protein in, and you can sneak some veggies in with that as well. And let your kids get involved with what goes in the smoothie. They can get so creative with finding smoothie recipes and creating ones that they like. But really, you know, just focusing on protein at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in your snacks. Ways to get protein into snacks, definitely all of your nuts. If your child's a nut allergy, then that complicates the protein, but there's lots of different nut butters to choose from. You can put, even if you're doing a popsicle, you can add, you know, if you want to do a banana chocolate peanut butter popsicle, you can add peanut butter to that. If you don't do nuts in your household, hummus is a great piece. My kids didn't love hummus in the beginning from the texture, but the more we did it, it's something that they really like now and ask in their lunches. And you can dip veggies, you can dip pretzels, you can do a lot of different things with hummus. And obviously people are good with working protein into dinner. So those are just some thoughts on protein throughout the day. One of my keys to success with eating is being prepared. And I have to admit, 80% of the time I'm not nearly as prepared as what I'd like to be, but that Sunday when I do pre-prep, I'm so proud of myself for like the next month. And it makes such a difference in how smoothly our week goes when I do take the time to do that. One of my favorite tricks are these veggie cups. And again, I'm not spending time every morning prepping these adorable little cups. What I like to do on an organized Sunday evening is just take 15 minutes and chop up a ton of veggies and put them in the fridge in a big Tupperware container. But what I find is if fruit and veggies are sitting out, my kids are never going to come in and say, hey, Mom, I'm in the mood for some celery. But if I have carrots and celery sitting out and they're walking by, they're going to snag one and pop it in their mouth as they're walking by. And the more they do that, the more they eventually start to like it. And I get less complaining over that. So trying to always have a fruit bowl and some veggies sticking out or sitting out. It's great for the adults in the house too. So when we're grazing and hungry and want to munch, if there's a bowl of grapes or some cut up fruit sitting out, as opposed to grabbing some junk out of the pantry, if it's sitting out, we're more likely to eat it. I've seen so many creative ideas of families that do pre-portioned snacks or have a whole snack bin for their kids in the summer. For us at our house, what I like to do is just have the junk food out of the house. So basically, if it's in the house, the kids can eat it. So that way I know they're not getting too much junk. And again, we'll do treats here and there, not as often as my kids would like, but we're not, you know, complete jerks about it. But I just have it set up for success for the whole family in the house. If you're in a scenario where you just realistically can't get it out of the house completely, is setting up a whole bin of pre-portioned things that are okay for the kids, so they know anytime they're hungry and it's not right before mealtime that they can go to that one particular place and grab a pre-portioned, you know, bag of popcorn or granola bar or whatever it may be. So planning ahead is always my key for success when it comes to food. And again, food has a huge impact on our kids' behaviors. The next piece to talk about for summer is the idea of planning. You know, we have to understand that all of us do better with structure. There's so many great studies that show that the busier we are, the more productive we are. And so there's a study looking at how often people work out, and people worked out more during a busy time than during a time like summer where they had all the time in the world. So busyness forces us to schedule things and put things down. So And then we have kids, and if there's any bits or pieces of immaturity in the child's development, that lack of structure can become even more challenging. So a lot of our kids really need to know what's coming next. If there's any sort of anxieties or worries, kids that struggle with transitions, they really need to know and understand, what is today going to look like? What do I, just so they can mentally prepare and feel comfortable with things. So such an easy way to do this, and depending on the age of your child, doing this together, is taking a big dry erase board or a dry erase calendar and mapping out not just your day, but your week. So that way, and you don't need to map out every single minute, but taking a look at spreading things out. So within a week, maybe you can pick a time where you're going to go to the library. You're going to pick a time to go to the pool. You're going to pick a time for your child to do something social with a friend. I know I'm so guilty of this, where life gets so busy that I'm terrible at scheduling play dates. Fortunately, we live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of kids right around us. So even when I slack on scheduling the playtime, they are able to get it in. But not everybody lives in a neighborhood like that. And so if you map it out of, hey, here's our goal of fun things and work things that we want to accomplish this week. Maybe this week I want everybody to tackle their bedrooms, and everybody's going to take a bathroom to wipe down. So if there's a visual planner of some sort, and each day have some sort of chore or responsibility that your child's going to do. And depending on their age, maybe it's, if they're younger, maybe it's unload the silverware from the dishwasher. If they're older, maybe it's, load and unload the dishwasher every day this week. But some sort of chore expectation, so that way they can check it off the list, and they know, hey, if I want screen time, or I want to go to the pool or the library today, I know I've got to get my chores done first. And then make sure when you're brainstorming things, so you're saying, okay, we want to go to the pool, we want to do all these different things, brainstorm ideas for both inside and outside. So that way, if it's 100 degrees and humid and the kids just can't be outside playing all day, that you've got a backup plan ready to go. And brainstorming ideas for inside that don't just revolve around technology, because there is a time for technology, but we've got to really balance that. So I love, again, doing that visual planner so the kids can see it, they can check things off, and go from there. One of the things for registering for this, you guys are going to receive an email, and these are some tools to help you with this. So I love My Brain Boosting Summer Routine. It's a chance for you to track some healthy eating, some reading, some social chores, and sleep. So just some great tools for you guys to help track things this summer. Next thing, talking about screen time. And I know we talk so much about screen time. I want to talk about it from a slightly different perspective. In our brain, we have all sorts of different networks and connections. And we have a whole, there's actually several different types of attention and focus networks in our brain. One of the attention and focus networks that we have are considered to be our short-term, reward-driven pathways. So an example of this, when a dad says to me, or a parent says to me, hey, I just don't get it. My child can play 2 hours of video games, but I ask him to sit down and do math, and I get, behavior. So I think he just doesn't like to do math. I think he's fine. He just needs to do things he likes to do. Well, doing math is using different pathways for attention and focus than playing a video game. So that's not comparing apples to apples. So 2 hours of a video game is not 2 hours of attention and focus. It's 30 seconds of attention and focus strung together 240 times. So every time we're playing video games, or we're on social media, or we're doing anything that gives us that instant gratification reward, we are utilizing our short-term reward-driven pathways. And we need those pathways. If we're playing a soccer game, we're utilizing those pathways, but we also need the pathways that give us sustained attention and focus. So sustained attention and focus is what I need to be able to read a book, to plant a garden, to drive my car from here to 2 hours to the beach, to sit in a classroom. So to be successful in our day-to-day pieces, we also need our sustained attention and focus pathways. So really, I want to challenge all of you to think about yourself and your kids. What are we doing on a daily basis for our kids and our families to make sure that we're not only driving our short-term reward-driven behaviors, but are we also building those long-term pathways? So making sure that when you're planning out a structure that you're including things in a daily basis for the kids that aren't just those reward-driven social media, video games kinds of pieces. The next piece that we want to take a look at is looking at movement. And this is going to play right into the technology piece as well. So one of the things that we know, and not all technology is bad, it's just bad in huge quantities. When we're on technology, so when we're watching a ton of television or playing video games, it's hugely fatiguing to our brain. And typically when we're doing those things, we're not moving. And here's what's really interesting to know is when I use the large muscle groups of my body, it fires input and really wakes up and engages my brain. Not only does it engage my brain, but it specifically engages regions of my brain that helps me modulate attention and focus, impulse control, and good behaviors. So one of the things that happens so often is you're going to notice you're going to get more in the way of negative behaviors after your child has spent a ton of time on technology. So that classic example of child doing a video game, they've played for a while, you ask them to turn it off, you get no, and then there's pouting and behavior afterwards. They just spent 2 hours fatiguing the brain and not using their muscles to wake up the part of the brain that does emotional regulation. So tip for success is work movement in throughout your day, every day, even when the kids are doing technology. So if they're going to play a bunch of video games, is okay, make it a rule in your house of as soon as you turn off the video game, they need to go run and play. If it's pouring rain, have them sprint the stairs. They don't need to go run 3 miles for this to be successful, but if you want good behavior, they've got to use the muscles to wake up the part of the brain that's going to help with that. So again, set your child and yourself up for success by working movement in. It's why we stretch first thing in the morning when we wake up. When we fire a muscle, it fires input into the brain and wakes the brain up as well. Just some ideas of ways to work movement in. I also love not just working movement in, but in the summer, finding some confidence building pieces for your kids that kind of push their boundaries. Last summer, so my kids are in the picture on the far right, it's the girl and boy on the far left and the far right. We signed our kids up last summer for a triathlon. It was a fundraiser for raising money for kids with cancer. So we did it in honor of a special friend of ours. And so the kids were excited to do that. They were so nervous before the triathlon started. And it was such a cool event. So the kids had to swim and run and bike, and they were nervous about it. But to see the glow on their faces when they were done, they were so proud. Scores didn't matter, place didn't matter, but they have carried themselves. That it's just been a piece that I feel like impacted them so much larger than what I anticipated. So not only having your kids move, but find some new and different ways to push their boundaries and build their confidence with that as well. And they can't wait to do that again this June. It's the Pinky Swear Triathlon, to do a little plug for them. It was great. Just other simple things is that involves movement that is also involving your long-term sustained pathways where the kids can do something and feel really good about it afterwards. Things like planting a garden, painting a fence, mowing the yard. It's not exciting to go paint a fence, but it's good for our kids to experience something that's work that at the end they get to sit back and point to it and say, I did that. That was hard work, but look at the payoff and benefit is every time I look at that fence, I can see what a great job I did with that. The next thing to touch on is positivity. Of course, positivity is important for all of us. Again, parenting moment that struck me in this last year, our kids were on a break and we had plans with friends, and there was just terrible behaviors that morning, and there was whining and complaining, and I just got fed up and frustrated, and I said, you know what, that's it, we're canceling the play date. We're not doing that. We need to do something today where we're putting others before ourselves. And we live in North Carolina. There had just been one of the big hurricanes, and they were doing a huge volunteer piece out at the airport where private planes were flying supplies out to the areas that were landlocked, for swamped in by water. And so I called to see if kids could come. And the friends that we canceled on for play date, the mom said, oh my gosh, would you bring my kids along too? This would be so good for them. So of course the kids weren't happy about canceled friend plans and instead needing to go work. But again, in the end, it was such an eye opener for them to realize that we were bringing these kids and families water and diapers and medicine, the basic things that they needed, that they were realizing that they didn't have. And so it was such an awareness, eye-opening piece for them. They worked so hard that whole day, and again asked to go back several days in a row because they felt so good about contributing. So that was just such a great reminder to me of finding things for them, for the kids to do that's volunteering or something where they're putting others before themselves, and what a positive experience that ends up being. Another important piece is, in talking about positivity, is the idea of boredom. Boredom to me is such an important piece for all of us to experience, and it's so easy in our busy lives to plan every minute of every day with our kids and constantly be rushing from one place to another. But with our busy schedules and with our constant technology at the tips of our fingers, our kids and ourselves are so rarely bored. But I watch the most interesting creativity come from my kids in the times of boredom. So when it's a Saturday and we don't have their tablets out, and we don't have soccer games that we're running to, and there's no structure, that's when they find the cardboard box and make a train or whatever. So just reminding yourselves, giving yourselves permission to allow your kids to be bored. And yes, there's some whining and complaining at first, but then they figure out what to do with themselves. They develop the ability to self-entertain, which I think is actually a skill that's necessary for all of us, kids and adults. And so reminding yourselves to give your kids time to just simply have downtime and figure out how to entertain themselves. So not always providing them with the answer of what to do. You can certainly do an activity jar where you write down a whole bunch of different ideas, but even with that, that's not them coming up with the idea in the moment. I think it's great to allow the kids to get to a point of being bored, so then they have to think of something or come up with something to do. We're going to come back to positivity in a little bit as well. The next piece is sleep. We all know that sleep is necessary for success with how we feel. This is one of my favorite pictures of my son, and I managed to work it into so many presentations, and someday he's really not going to appreciate this. So again, this is my son, Drew. He's typically a really chill, calm, easygoing kid, but even a chill, calm, easygoing kid, when on vacation with less sleep, will handle things far less gracefully than what he typically does. Cambridge Brain Science is a really interesting group that does a ton of great research, and they just recently did a sleep study looking at, they had 40,000 participants in this sleep study. And a piece that was so interesting to me is one of the things that came from the sleep study, and they would measure cognition, so to see how you performed with cognitive activities with different degrees of sleep deficit. And what they found was, if you've been awake for 18 hours straight, you function the same cognitively as somebody who is mildly intoxicated by alcohol. And so we would never let our kids consume alcohol, and we wouldn't expect good behaviors if they did. But yet when we're on vacation, when we're hanging out with friends at a backyard barbecue, we'll keep our kids up later, and then once again, we expect good behavior. So to really help set our kids up for success with good behavior is, maybe you start the backyard party a little bit earlier so that you leave and still get the kids to bed on time. So really reminding ourselves that even though it's light out longer, our kids need so much more sleep even than we do. They have growing bodies, and they need that. And so just remembering, again, to set your kid up for success, making sure that they get enough sleep in the process. So then why is it that some kids can have minimal sleep, lots of noise and chaos, and handle things fine, and others don't? Well, what we're seeing is, if there's any aspect of struggle with the development, kids are going to have a harder time kind of rolling with things, going with the flow. Stats are coming out saying that 1 out of every 4 children has some aspect or degree of struggle in a variety of different categories. At Brain Balance, certainly one of the most common things that we see is struggle with focus. There's also a ton of struggle with impulse control, handling sensory information. We're watching anxiety increase year by year in all of our kids, and also regulating emotions and behaviors. So when you look at those challenges that a lot of our kids face on a daily basis. And then we put a child that struggles with sensory input and regulating emotions and anxiety, and then we give them a scenario with lots of sugar, less sleep, tons of stimulation. Those are really stressful scenarios, even if we're trying to provide our kids a fun experience. Just a quick touch on research. What is research telling us about all of this is when a child is struggling with attention and focus, the research is showing us that there's impact in other areas as well. So what these studies are basically telling us is nothing in the brain happens in isolation. So if you see struggle with one area of your child, whether it's anxiety or behavior control, there's more to it than just that. Each time you light one nerve in the body or engage one nerve in the brain, it connects with up to 1,000 other neurons. So if there's a concern in one part, it's going to impact lots of other things as well. It's just hard for us to sometimes look at that and draw the dots on, oh my gosh, all those pieces are linked together and are really coming from the same thing. So again, what we're seeing is kids that struggle with attention and focus also may struggle a little bit more with balance, with body coordination, with how they perceive sensory input. The research is also showing us that when there's struggle with attention and focus, that there's a difference in connectivity in the brain. And so it's not just symptoms that a child presents with, there's something physically different in that brain. And what's great is it doesn't mean it's broken. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just simply that connectivity presents different on imaging studies than it does with a child that does well with attention and focus. The other good news with that is research is showing us that connectivity in the brain can be changed. So just because a child struggles with anxiety or attention and focus, and there may be a difference in connectivity in some parts of their brain, what the research is showing us is that by doing very specific things in a very specific fashion, you can change the connectivity of the brain. And when we change the connectivity of the brain, we see a reduction in the symptoms. So ton more research and available on this. Beginning in May, our Brain Balance website is going to be so much more robust in the research that it's offering. So because we're getting more and more requests for parents wanting to know more about that. So the bottom line is research is showing us that if there's a struggle with one area, there's usually other things involved as well, that there's a difference in connectivity, and that connectivity can be changed. And when it changes, we see a change in the symptoms as well. So when we think about networks and pathways in the brain, I always picture it like a roadmap. And so we've got this country with lots of beautiful, cool areas, but if we don't have the pathways to get there, it doesn't matter how cool the area is. So a lot of what development is building networks and pathways so that we can utilize the correct areas of our brain, so that we can utilize the area of our brain that when I get frustrated, it has me rein in my behavior instead of throwing myself down on the ground and getting frustrated or upset. So what is it that engages a neuron to drive those connections and pathways? What we know are the two biggest engages of the brain are our senses and our movement. So again, to go back to why we want to minimize technology and maximize movement, movement is one of the biggest drivers of brain development and maturity. So the more we move, the more we're activating and engaging pathways and networks in the brain. So what learning is each time I do something, a series of neurons fire in my brain. So if I'm trying to do something new, if I'm going to read a sight word and I'm sounding out a word like, I don't know, log, and I'm muddling through it. I'm looking at the L, I'm trying to remember what it sounds like, and then I'm going through the letters. But then if I do that again and again and again, eventually that pattern of how those pathways connect becomes set. So the second I look at the word log, I don't have to sound it out. Boom, that pathway is just there and I can access it. So the first time you smell coffee, if you've never smelled coffee before, you smell it. Somebody tells you the word coffee and you go, oh, okay. Then the next time you smell it, boom, right away you know that's coffee. That's a set pattern of how nerves fire. And so that's what all learning is creating a pattern or a network and doing it enough so that it becomes set. So a jumping jack, I can do a jumping jack and I can have a conversation with you. That's a set pattern of how things fire. If you were to change the pattern of the jumping jack and have me do a reverse jumping jack with a double hop, now suddenly I'm not able to have a conversation while I'm doing that. I really have to think it through and take my time doing it. So if we have a child that struggles with attention or struggles with how they handle themselves when they're frustrated and upset or with transitions. What that tells us is we need to work the areas of the brain to build those pathways and connections in the brain so that they're able to handle themselves in a more age-appropriate fashion. So to go back to positive thinking. So we talked about how a set pattern of how things fire, you do it often enough and it becomes locked in. Learning how to ride a bike. You can go 10 years without doing it and you can hop back on a bike. It's because there's a set pattern of how those networks fire. Thoughts are the same thing. The same thing as a sequence of neurons firing. So we want our kids to develop that positive self-talk. So every time they try something, maybe they're trying to hit a golf ball and they miss, we want that positive self-talk to be, I can do that. And we want that to become a set pattern. And so we really want to role model for ourselves that positive self-talk. And so if I'm golfing and I miss, I don't go, ugh, darn it, I suck at this. Instead, I'm going to say, ooh, I can do this. Let me try again. So we want to model it in our behavior and we want to encourage it in the kids as well. So how they think about themselves, how they talk about themselves. If we talk in positivity, we're going to set those set patterns of how the brain fires in positivity. So keeping things positive can form positive networks and pathways in the brain. So what we know about kids is, again, if we see areas of challenge and struggle, whether it's attention and focus, making friends, school, whatever that is, that to us is a red flag that there may be gaps and holes in their development. So that's what we do at Brain Balance is we take a look through our assessment to see, are there gaps and holes in development? Where are they? And it allows us to create a roadmap of, okay, where are things doing exactly what they're supposed to do and where do things need to do better? So again, it doesn't mean that anything's wrong with the child. It means that there could be areas where things could be better. So we're looking for those gaps and holes in development. So if we talk about gaps and holes in development, you know, most parents don't look at their child and say, gosh, it's like my kid's got some gaps and holes. Instead, there might be a red flag of, you know, gosh, my child requires a lot more redirection to get through homework than his older sibling. But it's hard to pinpoint, you know, that maybe their coordination is a little behind. It's hard to pinpoint these things. So that's where the assessment becomes so interesting, is it allows us to pinpoint things that we maybe don't always pick up on our kids. And it shows us, you know, yes, there's something going on there, or no, really and truly, it's a 12-year-old boy and that's okay. So it allows us to answer the question of, are there gaps and holes? So I wanted to share the example of Jackson. This would just be an example of what gaps and holes look like in real life. Awesome kid, great sense of humor, great personality. Jackson's family reached out to us towards the end of 3rd grade because he was really struggling in school, and that struggle was getting bigger and bigger. So this sweet, happy, great kid, when they got to homework time, was not a sweet, happy, great kid. And so he was resisting it more and more. There was lots of tears, frustration. I can't do this. I'm stupid. And then at the end of the year, after Jackson did his 3rd grade end of year testing, school reached out and they were concerned. He was falling further and further behind. So his family reached out to Brain Balance. So then what we do with kids like Jackson at Brain Balance is, again, we're working to drive connectivity in the brain so that we see a minimization of the symptoms and challenges and concerns. And again, what research shows us is the strongest, best ways to engage the brain is through movement and our senses. So we're just doing that in a really, really specific way, depending on what areas of the brain that we need to work on with the child. So we're engaging lots of things all at the same time and then progressing it forward. And by doing that, again, we're able to address those gaps and holes in development. I love this picture. So Jackson came to us the end of 3rd grade, and this is Jackson now as a 10th grader. And Jackson was so fun, where after he did program for years, every quarter, he would email the center his report card. So Jackson went from a struggling student to AB honor roll and has maintained AB honor roll ever since. And now we're really putting the pressure on him to continue to maintain that since we're sharing this. But the biggest things is, you know, Jackson's family saw not just a decrease in the amount of time and frustration homework took, but they saw a change in his confidence level and his comfort level, where he really started to feel like, okay, I can do this. So at Brain Balance, I have to be super clear. We don't fix kids. We don't make kids perfect. But by addressing the gaps and holes in development, we can minimize so many of the challenges that our kids are facing on a daily basis. So that was Jackson's story. But at Brain Balance, we've worked with over 35,000 kids, and so it's not just about those individual stories. I love, this is such a silly thing, but it's something I'm really proud of, is overall, when you look at our Google reviews across the country, out of everyone that's done the program, we rank 4.6 out of 5 stars across Google and Facebook. And we have about 115 locations across the country. And again, we've worked with over 35,000 kids. So our families that have done program really and truly see a difference with their kids, and it makes a difference in their lives as well. Over 80% of our families have said that they were likely or extremely likely to recommend Brain Balance. And they feel that way because on average, our kids will see a 60% improvement in their overall happiness, a 46% improvement in their social confidence and behaviors, 43% improvement in behavior, and the list goes on and on. We have 200 questions that all of our families answer pre and post, talking about academics and emotional regulation and anxiety, and so we're able to track what those changes look like. In addition to that, Brain Balance has been really excited. We've been participating in a study with the Harvard McLean Hospital in Boston, and the white paper hopefully will be coming out sometime in the next couple months here. So if you were fortunate enough to be a participant in this study, this is a picture of just the login screen. So this is a study where families were doing a couple parts of Brain Balance at home. So they weren't even doing the full Brain Balance program, just some aspects of Brain Balance at home. And what they're seeing in this study is an objective, measurable change in attention, so an increase in attention, a decrease in distractibility. They did imaging studies with it as well, and saw a change in connectivity in 2 key aspects of the brain that are involved with attention and focus and emotional regulation. So the research is showing great changes, and our families are experiencing those changes as well. So overall, just our key tips to set you up for success this summer is to think about what we can do for our kids to allow them to be successful. So what we eat matters, creating a plan and structure that includes not just fun things, but chores and responsibilities, as well as a variety of things. A reminder that technology is not bad. We want to just minimize it. We want to balance it with movement. And if we're doing technology, we also want to balance that with things in the brain that are going to build our sustained attention pathways, so our kids are able to sit down and read a book or pay attention through a 2-hour biology lecture when they get to college. Keeping in mind that positivity through our actions and our thoughts matter, and the more consistent we are with those positive thought patterns, pretty soon those become set networks in the brain of positivity for our kids. And of course, every single one of us does better with sleep. I'm a better parent when I'm well rested, and my kids are better in their behavior when they're well rested as well. So again, so often what we see at Brain Balance is parents aren't sure where their kids are. If you've got red flags or concerns, a really easy thing to do is just to start with an assessment. And that's going to show you, are there gaps and holes, and to really allow you to know and understand what's going on with your child. I always say we can't create a plan forward if we don't really know where we're at. So we always start with an assessment at Brain Balance, and the assessment doesn't obligate you to anything at all. It's just purely an information process to really understand what's going on with your child, and then you can go from there. So as a thank you for joining us here today, you are going to receive an email with these downloadable tools to help, again, set you up for success for the summer. And for any of the families out there that decide they do want to do an assessment at Brain Balance, if you do an assessment and complete the assessment prior to May 15th, so you've got a month, then as a thank you, you will receive an emailed Amazon gift card as well. So I know that was a ton of information. Thank you for your time. Victoria, were there any questions I can answer that popped up?
Yeah, so we'll get started with questions, everyone, if you want to start typing them in. We have about 10 more minutes for questions, and then we need to hop off. So thank you. Joel, yes, you will receive a recording of this, but not the PowerPoint in an email. Sherry asks, and this is a really great question, what can I do to further support my child if there's not a Brain Balance Center in my area?
Oh, that's an awesome question. You know, the biggest thing is understanding senses and movement drive all of brain development. And so again, staying physically active is one of the best things that we can do for the brain. There's also the book Disconnected Kids is a great resource for parents, where it's certainly not the equivalent to doing brain balance in the center, but it gives you lots of things that you can do at home for your child. Again, we're able to do things in center just because we have technology, we've got just a way to kind of take it to a whole nother level. But the book Disconnected Kids is a great starting point.
Okay, we have a ton of questions, so let me just scroll up to the top.
Okay.
Hi, my child is a third. I believe this means my child is in third grade. That has been diagnosed with ASD as well as ADHD. What would be good for him to work on for his confidence during the summer?
Yeah, so ASD, so autism spectrum disorder, you know, what we know about autism is there's going to be lots of underconnectivity in the right hemisphere of the brain, and that side of the brain really helps us with our social interactions. And I find that most traditional options jump to what the symptom is. And so if the child's struggling with social, have them practice social instead of looking at how is it that those pieces come together in the brain. So to me, with a right brain child in third grade, I would want to do a ton of activities involving core muscle and balance, and also his ability to sense and feel his body. And so a ton of time barefoot in the sand, on a trampoline, on uneven, unstable surfaces, forces that body to balance and react and engage those core muscles. And those are the developmental building blocks that build the part of the brain that allow us to see and perceive social cues. So if a child rolls their eyes, am I seeing it and do I know what that means? And so while you don't look at your child and think, oh gosh, he really needs to work on balance, balance is what is going to underlie the development of the pieces that are going to help him on the social things. And so keeping him physically active is going to build the part of the brain that's going to help him with that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I love this question. My daughter is 14. Is it too late to look at brain balance as an option?
Absolutely not. In fact, we are rolling out for this summer a summer college reboot program. So we're going to be working with kids up to about the age of 24. And we don't see a reduction in the change as kids get older. So honestly, it's never too late to change your brain. You can have a 90-year-old and still have an impact on brain connections. Now at that point, clearly you're worried about degeneration, not development. But no, absolutely, we can see some really great changes in development in our 14-year-olds. So not too late at all.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. My child is enrolled in summer camps this summer. Can a child do brain balance in summer camp at the same time? And the second part of this question, how do I make sure that my child eats healthy at camp?
Yeah. So some of the eating healthy at camp is going to be a hassle, but personally, I would be packing lunches and snacks. So that way I know what it is that my child is getting and eating. And so many kids these days have different eating pieces and concerns. So I feel like while you might get some pushback initially from your kids, just hold your gun, stick to it. They'll get used to it. And so, yes, it's more work. Get your kids involved in packing the lunches, pack them the night before. They will be better off in their behavior after camp, eating healthier foods. And yes, a ton of kids are doing summer camps in addition to brain balance. It's amazing that kids get used to what we put in front of them. So the first week of camp and brain balance, we'll see that the kids are tired, but by week 2, they're used to it and they're able to do both. So just like our kids during the school year do school and brain balance, same thing. In the summer, we'll have kids in summer camps all day and then coming to brain balance in the evening.
Okay, thank you. We are currently seeing an OT and a therapist, as well as writing therapy. I have asked the school for an evaluation academically, but they say it's not needed, although she struggles in school. Can brain balance do this type of testing?
Yeah, so we do a really full comprehensive assessment. You know, we're looking for different information than what the schools are looking for. And so we're not looking to see, you know, what, you know, if the child's working on literacy, what letter blends they're missing. So we're building a curriculum that way. We're looking at the assessment to show us what parts of the brain are doing exactly what they're supposed to, and what parts of the brain do we need to drive forward for better success. But yes, absolutely, we do a full assessment to really understand areas of strengths and weaknesses to create a plan off from going forward. Did that answer the question, Victoria?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. Okay. Joel has two questions. One is, would you say there is a linear progression from healthy neurodevelopment to ADHD and then to ASD? I think that's a very interesting question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like that's a question that would take more time and depth than the 3 minutes we have remaining. But absolutely what we see is there are differences in connectivity in the brain from a quote unquote typical brain to a brain that's struggling with attention and focus and a brain that's struggling with more. Absolutely, there are some similar connectivity issues in ADHD as well as in autism. But what we see with autism is then there tends to be connectivity issues in even more areas of the brain. So to say a linear progression from one to another might be oversimplifying it a little bit. In some ways, yes. But the word linear, it's just not as simple as linear. But absolutely, there's overlap in areas.
Okay, and then Joel's second part of his question is, has brain balance showed results for adults?
Great question. Yes, and it's not something that we offer across the country. It is something that we're looking to expand on. So we don't have an adult program right now. This summer we are launching our the summer college boot camp for those young adults. And so we're moving in that direction more and more because we have seen outcomes showing success with adults.
Okay, if your child is not on reading level, can they attend brain balance?
Absolutely. You know, it's so interesting with our kids at Brain Balance. We have kids at Brain Balance that are significantly above their reading level, right at their reading level, significantly below their reading level. You don't have to have a label or a diagnosis in order to do Brain Balance. In fact, both of my kids have done it. And they had areas of concern, but wouldn't have qualified for a full-blown label or diagnosis. But yet we saw really positive changes in lots of areas with both of the kids. So we work with kids that have strengths and weaknesses. And those strengths and weaknesses are different in each of the kids that we work with. So yes, we can absolutely work with a child that's below reading level. And the hope is by maturing parts of the brain and addressing some of the challenges and why they're behind, that we see things move forward. When we see struggle in academics, it typically doesn't come from poor teaching or a lack of exposure. It's the brain not receiving and retaining the information the way it should. So our goal is to mature those areas of the brain so that the brain is able to take in the information, make sense of it, retain it, and then use it when necessary.
Okay, we've had a couple different questions around the same topic, so I just wanted to ask you this quick question, and I'll summarize each, and then this is going to be the last one for today since we're running out of time. We've had a couple questions around vacation and family vacations in the summer, and why, A, do children really tend to have poor behavior during family vacations, and then what can we do to prepare ourselves for those vacations, which I think we really touched on a lot of those structure daily routine tips, but I think it would be great for you to answer the question of why.
Yeah, so again, when we have a child, let me put it this way. we all have that point. We all have that breaking point of when we become, I'm going to say symptomatic, but I have a point where I'm going to lose my frustration and lose my cool with my kids. So I picture I'm standing on a cliff. Am I standing at the very edge of the cliff about to fall off, or am I standing 2 miles away from the cliff? So we all have that point of where we're going to melt down or get angry or get frustrated or have anxiety flare up or stop paying attention. But if there's any developmental pieces, that pushes us closer and closer to the cliff because it complicates things. So we have less of a threshold to tolerate things. Then we add into that different sleep patterns on vacation. Maybe I'm in a hotel room sharing a bed with a sibling and I hear dad snoring all night, so I'm not sleeping as much or as well. So that shifts me closer to the cliff. Then I'm eating food different than what I eat at home. I'm ordering soda at the restaurant more. I'm doing cheese pizza and French fries at every single meal. So all of these different things, lots of noise and stimulation is fatiguing on the brain. Less sleep, different eating patterns. All of those things minimize the threshold for all of us of how we tolerate things. So if I come home from work and my house is a mess and the kids are running around and the dog's barking, if I'm well rested, I can roll my eyes and say, okay, guys. If I'm exhausted and I've had a stressful day, then I'm going to walk in and I'm going to be more frustrated and more irritated. So with our kids on vacation, we're off routine, we're off eating, off sleeping, everything's different, but yet we're expecting great behavior. And so making sure that the kids, even on vacation, are getting protein and healthy fats. They're not getting too much sugar and food dyes. They're getting sleep. They're not spending too much time on technology. If you have a long drive and they're going to be, on tablets playing video games for 5 hours, chances are you're going to have negative behavior once you take that away. So balancing things with movement, those are all pieces that are really going to help set you up for success. So don't overschedule. Don't try to put too much into a day just because you're there for that 1 week out of the year. The whole family will enjoy the day more if everyone's well rested, well fed, have some quiet time, and haven't fatigued the brain too much from constant technology.
Awesome. Well, Rebecca Jackson, thank you so much for all these helpful tips today. Again, to all of our attendees, we appreciate you so much logging on today to listen to us. Anyone who did register for the webinar, as we said, is going to receive a recording, as well as our summer tips for structuring your day downloadable resource. And if you do book your assessment by May 15th and you complete that assessment, you'll receive a gift card as part of just a thank you for attending our webinar today, listening to what we have to say, and interacting with us through your great questions. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.